Because of the pandemic, a lot of people have been looking towards video games as a source of entertainment. I know that I've had so many new video game experiences that I could probably make a video titled Games That Helped Me Through the Pandemic, or something like that. But even though I'm glad to have made great headway into my extensive backlog, I can't help but feel that something is missing. While I mainly played single-player games, I also made sure to play online multiplayer games to stay connected to family and friends, even trying games I would otherwise not care for because it's honestly fun just chatting in-game. The video game I spent the most time playing online was, believe it or not, Super Smash Bros. Melee for the Nintendo Personal Computer. Yeah, if you haven't heard, the Melee community put together a basically lag-free way of playing Melee online called Slippy, conveniently just in time for the start of the pandemic. I'd like to consider myself a decently experienced Melee player, having started in 2015, so when I heard of Slippy I was absolutely thrilled. Even though all in-person tournaments had been cancelled for the foreseeable future because of the pandemic, that didn't seem like such a big issue because we could just continue to play in tournaments online. If you take a look at my earlier YouTube videos, you can see that I'm what many call a geek, or addict, or even freak when it comes to the pure mechanics of the game. Basically, it didn't matter where I was playing Melee or who my opponent was, I just really love Waveshine comboing with Fox McCloud. So I entered online tournaments, some exclusive to participants in my area, and some open to anyone on the East Coast. While it did take some getting used to, it was still a Super Smash Bros. Melee tournament at the end of the day. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. As the tournaments came and went, and then came again, Super Smash Bros. Melee, the game I had a strong passion for and great memories of, started to feel like every other online multiplayer game, until eventually, one day I just stopped. Melee went from being the game I'd want to play all day every day at the start of the pandemic, to winding up my controller and uninstalling Slippy only a couple months later. At the time, I thought I just didn't like the game anymore, but looking back on it, I realized that I wasn't playing the same Super Smash Bros. Melee that caught my eye way back in 2015. Ever since I was a kid, I was always attracted to the idea of competition and tournaments. I've played competitive volleyball, competitive badminton, even competitive curling. Yeah, that winter sport with the rings and the brooms. I guess you could call it my competitive nature, but there was always something so intriguing about traveling to an event and competing against others all aiming for a similar goal. Eventually, in 2011, I would enter my very first video game tournament, the Pokémon Video Game National Championships in Indianapolis. I'd been obsessed with Pokémon for pretty much my entire life, but up until that point it consisted of just casually playing the games and battling my close friends every now and then. The event completely had me in a state of shock, with the realization of what was happening not kick in until the announcer counted down the start of our first matches and the Eye of the Tiger started playing on the loudspeakers. I have to give credit to the organizational efforts that go behind these large-scale tournaments, because the hype levels were off the charts, and obviously not every video game tournament is going to be like that. But seeing as how that was my first ever experience at a video game tournament, I was hooked from day one. I would enter various Wi-Fi tournaments in addition to the in-person tournaments later on, but I'd be lying if I said I recalled anything from those online tournaments other than the fact that they happened. Similarly to my time with Slippy, the Pokemon Wi-Fi tournaments just felt like any other online multiplayer game, and it all kind of blurs together. I probably had some really amazing matches, but because it was an online tournament, I can't remember any of them. Whereas with in-person tournaments, I vividly remember each of my greatest victories and my roughest defeats. I'm no psychologist, but I think it's easier to remember occasions when they're tied to specific places or events, rather than at home behind your computer screen. For example, I remember round 1 of the last chance qualifier at the 2011 Pokémon Video Game National Championships like it was yesterday. Since I didn't qualify in advance, I had to claim my spot in the main event by first going through a dangerous 3-round single-elimination unseeded bracket. While waiting for the clock to count down the start of round 1, I made light conversation with the competitors around me. Just like myself, they had all traveled great distances to attend this event, and in less than 15 minutes, half of us would have their tournament run ended. Despite the intense atmosphere, the cocky kid I was at the time looked towards my opponents and said, "Do you even EV train?" The poor guy's response, probably a couple years younger than myself, was, "Yeah, I EV train. I've got Jolteon, Flareon, and Vaporeon." Some of the other players beside us couldn't help but snicker at my opponent's answer. The ironic part was I hadn't ever done EV training myself at that time. It was just something I learned about from talking to other players at the event. In 2011, and in the seniors division, the division for my age group, it actually wasn't all that common for players to EV train, let alone Ivy breed. I'll always remember the look of utter sadness on his face when I defeated him. I really wish I at least got his name or even tried talking to him later on in the event, but being the oblivious kid I was at the time, I cheerfully hopped to the next set of tables for round 2. These are the types of experiences that stick with you, the kind of scenarios you'd see in the tournament arc of an anime or movies. You just don't get this type of interactions with online tournaments. For a lot of people, probably the best part of attending video game tournaments, or any type of convention for that matter, is honestly just hanging out with your friends. Having friends with you elevates the experience in almost every way. You can still have a great time going to an event without friends, especially if you're a bit more social and are good at making friends, but I definitely advise having a parent or guardian accompany you if you're younger. I was 14 when I attended the Pokémon tournament I've already spoken about, and my dad trucked along as I bounced all around the venue taking in the experience. I would always come up to him after a match and excitedly explain how I made the clutch trick room play to win, or any other type of technique he didn't understand but tried to follow along nonetheless. So even though I couldn't quite nerd talk with him in the way you could with friends, for that tournament he filled the role of a friend in addition to watching out for me, and for that I'm extremely lucky and grateful. When I was a bit older and getting into Melee, I got my friends interested in it as well, and we all attended tournaments together. Having friends with you at these tournaments boosts your confidence levels to the max. They're your ultimate support. Even just walking up to the venue with your squad feels good. They can often give you tips about your upcoming match, or even help you warm up, kind of like sparring partners. And if they're feeling extra supportive, they can even become your own cheering section during a match. And of course, probably the most underrated aspect of having friends with you at a video game tournament is having someone you can vent to when you're salty after losing. I remember many times where my frustration quickly went away just by talking about the match to a friend. And conversely, I remember many times where my friend's excitement for my own victory resulted in an even higher high. At one regional Melee tournament, I was playing a top 8 qualifier match off stream later in the day. It was a 2-day tournament and most people had gone home at that point, so it was really only my opponent and I. However, silently watching from a distance was my friend J-Dip. He was quiet during the whole match, but when I won, he ran up to me and said, "Let's go, Alex, let's go, top 8. I'm not one for pop-offs, and the fact that I won hadn't quite sunk in yet, especially since my opponent was the clear favorite, but my friend hyping me up after that victory was honestly the best thing ever. And because of that, my memory of that match will forever have my friend in it. In a lot of cases, some of the most memorable moments I have from these tournaments don't even happen during the actual tournament, whether it's road trips with the squad or the traditional after-tournament McDonald's or Popeyes meal. It's all part of the video game tournament experience. A memory in particular that stands out to me is one time after a tournament a group of players in my local area had traveled about 2 hours to. The tournament finished pretty late, which is typical for these kinds of events, and you bet we were gonna stop somewhere to eat on the way home. Being in an area unfamiliar to us, we were looking over our food options. We could just go for the tried and true McDonald's run, but one of the players, Jai, known for being a kind of jokester among the group, suggested we try something a little different than usual. And I was all with him, since I too considered myself a man of culture. So to the other players' chagrin, we pulled up to what appeared to be a classy Eastern Asian restaurant on the corner of a strip mall. The mood within our group lightened as the players previously opposed to the decision started liking the idea of having a proper sit-down meal for once. However, once seated inside, we could hear loud music at the other side of the large room, blocked off by a curtain. It was already strange enough that we seemed to be the only people there, but when we paired the fancy dining sets with the expensive menu items, we quickly discovered what it was like to crash a wedding. And when the curtain opened up and the dancing guests made their way to the tables, we all swiftly agreed that a Big Mac better suited our taste buds. That last example obviously isn't exclusive to just video game tournaments. Many of you who've attended other types of conventions probably have similar memorable moments or hijinks with friends. Personally, the most consistently enjoyable experience I look forward to at a video game tournament is friendlies. Those of you that play Smash Bros probably know what I'm talking about. Friendlies are basically just practice matches or matches for fun. Any match you play outside of actual tournament play is more than likely a friendly. For Pokémon tournaments, I find friendlies to be a bit less prevalent. Most competitors craft their teams in advance with surprise tactics that are best kept secret until the first tournament match begins. The top level players will even use a secondary team in friendlies and only unveil their main team secrets in top 8 or beyond. Of course, none of that stopped me from challenging every person I met to a battle at my first tournament. They even held mini side brackets every hour where the top 3 placements would win booster packs. Gotta love the amount of funding the Pokémon Company International pours into these events. Pretty much all the Pokémon cards I own are from playing in side brackets at those tournaments. Friendlies at Smash Bros tournaments are much more straightforward. You enter the venue and you immediately spot an open chair at a setup just calling your name. Whereas at Pokémon tournaments, it's more of an even split between time spent playing friendlies and time spent playing actual tournament matches. Smash tournaments will always have more friendly time than tournament match time. There's 2 reasons for this. The first is that Smash Bros matches typically finish pretty quick, especially if you're playing Melee. And the second reason is that most Smash tournaments start straight into a double elimination bracket, meaning a ton of players are out of the running early on and basically have the rest of the day to play friendlies or feel bad for losing so early. I'll be honest, it really does suck traveling to a tournament only to get knocked out in 2 rounds, and if you're a new player, this is almost guaranteed to happen. However, if you're like me and take every opportunity to play friendlies, you honestly forget you were even in the tournament bracket to begin with. This type of mentality definitely isn't for everyone, but I'd suggest you push a little out of your comfort zone and at least give it a chance. In school, I was far from an outgoing type of person. I would only stick to my small friend circle, and I never even thought about branching out. Some may have even considered me a shy individual, and some probably still do. But when I step into a tournament venue and take a whiff of that convention-smelling air, it has a distinct smell, for better or for worse. I become a whole new person. I change from Alex into Snivy102. I'm sure we all know that it's easier to talk with others if you share something in common, and at a video game tournament that basically holds true for everyone you'll meet. So with that knowledge beforehand, I confidently sit down at the nearest setup and say, "Hey, I'm Snivy102. Want to play friendlies?" with almost the goofiest of grins on my face because I know I'm about to wave shine my little fox heart out. As long as you're respectful, there's almost no possibility of them declining. I've been to tons of tournaments and I've never been declined a friendly. I can't quite explain why, but people just seem to be more friendly in person than they are online. When playing friendlies on Slippy, or even Pokemon Showdown, I consistently get toxic players and of course the ever so common rage quitters. But think about it. Do you know how silly a rage quitter would look at an in-person friendly setup with potentially 3 other people huddled around the TV? Online you can just type some foul words and hide your behavior, but in person you'd just be embarrassing yourself. The live environment of an in-person video game tournament tends to keep your emotions in check. Throughout my years of competing in various tournaments, not just video game tournaments, I've had plenty of tough losses and thrilling victories, but one thing I always prided myself on was my dedication to sportsmanship. When you lose, you shouldn't cause a scene. You were bested after all, by someone who probably also dedicated a great amount of time to the craft, or maybe they just outsmarted you in the moment. And when you win, you should showcase a level of maturity. Win with grace, as they say. There's no need to knock someone while they're down. Obviously, not everyone sees it the way I do, and even if they do, it isn't always easy sticking to those guidelines in the heat of the moment, but it's something I think about at every tournament I attend. However, when I started to play a lot of Slippy during the pandemic, I began to lose that part of myself. I could feel a level of toxicity start to bubble within me. When I lost matches, instead of thinking about how I could have won, I only thought about why I shouldn't have lost. It was always something along the lines of, "I'm way better than this player. They only won because they got lucky." Or, "There's no way they'd win if we played offline." This unhealthy mindset soon came out verbally when I started streaming my matches and I needed to make an excuse for why I lost, to the point where it became embarrassing when Twitch clips were made and my attitude was on full display for others, but most hauntingly, on display for myself. Is that really me? I thought to myself when rewatching those clips. What had happened to me? Is this really the same Snivy102 that had always been so cool and collected at in-person tournaments? Online multiplayer games change a person. Now I know why so many League of Legends players tell me it's like a bad marriage. Alexa, remind me every day at 8 AM to not try out League.
Okay, reminding you every day at 8 AM to try out League.
The human element at an in-person tournament really changes the whole environment. After a match, you can look right at your opponent and see exactly how they react to the win or loss. Don't look too intently though, or you might not make any friends. With online tournaments, I think a lot of us assume the absolute worst from our opponent because our mind likes to mess with us when we can't actually see the other player for ourselves. But even outside of actual matches, people online tend to have certain personas that don't always translate to real life. I know of plenty of players that seem like real jerks online, but then in person they're completely chill, and I'm sure many of you have similar stories about people you know. The whole online persona thing can actually get pretty out of control, especially with the top level players. Online they're seen as gods, and we often forget that at the end of the day, they're people just like you and I. If you talk to these players at real life tournaments, as long as you give them the same level of respect and breathing room that you would give any person, I know that's a lot to ask for some of the fandom, you'll almost always receive that level of respect and relatability back from them. I've played friendlies against Cybertron and Mewtwo, both at tournaments they ended up winning, and they acted like any other person attending the event. In Mewtwo's case especially, if you had no prior knowledge of him beforehand, there's absolutely no way you'd be able to point him out and say, yep, that's the guy with thousands of fans. In no way did he act superior to any other player at the event. He even came up to a setup that I was on with my friend and asked if he could join in. My friend and I looked at each other and we could tell that we were both thinking, Mewtwo just asked to play friendlies with us? In what world would we ever say no to that? Other than the enormous skill difference, the friendlies with Mewtwo went along the same as any other friendlies. We'd laugh or be shocked by the different plays, compliment each other when we did well, and share tips for how to improve. That's how any type of friendlies typically go. The atmosphere is always positive, and it's why I like them so much. The pandemic has really made me think about why I attended video game tournaments in the first place. I've always been a competitive person by nature, and I initially went to these events because it was the only way to actually play against other good players at the time. Now with robust online competitions, the fact that I'm still itching to get back to in-person tournaments proves that these events are so much more. I'm making it my new personal goal to attend these tournaments, not because I think I can win or to try and put my name on the map, but just to have fun. Do you really need any other reason than that?